I wanted to bring the power of self-healing to the world to empower people to not feel that they are prisoners of their conditions, that their conditions are only there to help them understand that the body's struggling, but that they need to seek out other answers that are not just conventional.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance longevity expert. And on today's podcast, I give you a very special treat. I'm actually going to share an excerpt of something I've been working on for the past year. It has been a passion project, a project of love called the Thrive State Summit. It's going to be an online and virtual event where I host 50 of the world's thought leaders and experts in the field of mental health, of how to actually get the tools to beat chronic stress and burnout. Really, it's going to be a resource that's going to be so valuable for you. You can register for free at thrivestatesummit.com. Now, if you are new to the podcast, I want to welcome you in. This podcast is really about elevating our life. And so I get the opportunity to bring in many of my friends who are thought leaders and world experts in the fields of mental health, resilience, longevity, relationships, business, where we come up with the tools and tactics for you to take your life to the next level. And for those who this podcast has already helped, if you are returning, thank you so much for allowing this podcast to grow. It is through your engagement, through you guys subscribing that really helps us. So if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. Please share this podcast with your friends and family members. And whenever you get a chance, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, consider picking up a copy of my book, Thrive State, at thrivestatebook.com. It's really the pillars, the blueprint that you need to actually control your energetic state, because it is our energetic state, the frequency by which we live life through, actually becomes a signal to our DNA that actually controls our physiology, that gives us access to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. Now, as I said before, this is an excerpt from the Thrive State Summit. It is certainly a passion project. I spent the past year interviewing 50 of the world's top leaders in mental health, emotional wellness, to really give you the tools. And on today's podcast, we'll just give you a small sample of one interview. And so if you want to listen to the entire interview, along with the entire interviews of 50 of the world expert in mental health, chronic stress, and burnout, please register now at thrivestatesummit.com. You'll particularly want to listen and register for the summit if you are feeling the weight of chronic stress or burnout, or maybe you're grappling with persistent symptoms of anxiety or depression, or maybe even physical symptoms of fatigue, brain fog, weight gain. They're all energetically connected. If we're not looking out for our mental health, our social health, our emotional health, our spiritual health, and physical health go out the window as well. So the Thrive State Summit is something that's so near and dear to my heart. I did it because I've had so many friends in the past couple of years really suffer from the consequences of not looking after our mental health, all the way down to suicide. And so I wanted to make sure that the world has resources when dealing with mental health issues, because not only can we avoid physical, emotional, mental symptoms, but we can also end up being the very best versions of ourselves, because trust me, the ones that love you, your family, your businesses, everyone around you is just that much better when you can bring the full you to them. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, which is the excerpt, and please register at thrivestatesummit.com. It is completely free. You're going to get so much value from it, but please enjoy this little excerpt from the Thrive State Summit. I hope to see you in the summit itself. Please enjoy this episode of the Thrive State Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to another session of the Thrive State Summit. Now, with me today is good friend, brother, and a mentor to me, Dr. Fab Mancini. He is not just a health expert, he's a transformational figure with over 3 decades of experience in holistic health, education, and personal development. He's an international best-selling author of books such as The Power of Self-Healing and Chicken Soup for the Chiropractic Soul. He's the host of the radio show with Hay House, Self-Healing with Dr. Fab, and his podcast, The Fab Life, and his TV series, Thriving in the New Normal. He actually became one of the youngest presidents of a college or university at the age of 33 at Parker University and continues to serve as President Emeritus. He has graced international stages, inspired millions, and authored bestsellers that have ignited the flames of self-healing within countless of individuals. Dr. Fab, my brother, welcome to the summit.
Well, man, I am so excited to be here with you, and also congratulations in addressing so many of the challenges that regular people around the world are experiencing right now, which I know they're going to get tremendous solutions based on this interview. So thank you for having me and adding me to this amazing roster of healers and influencers that are really impacting the lives of humanity.
Thank you, Dr. Fab. Now, I wonder this, we're starting to know this day and age that there are not just genetic problems that are just happening in our society, that a lot of potentially our pain, our physical symptoms, our mental health is coming from sources that we might not have thought possible. So was this your intuition earlier on of why you chose to do chiropractic medicine versus a more conventional route?
Yeah, it happened to me. I was heading towards medical school and I was involved in an accident, and the orthopedic surgeon at the hospital in the emergency sent me to his chiropractor. I had no idea what chiropractic was. I thought it was a specialty of medicine. And when I went in there, the doctor of chiropractic shared with me three things that I believe still the tenets that I live myself and I promote for the last 38 years. The first one is that the body is a self-healing organism. You have everything you need right now to heal inside of you. The matter is of accessing it and also preserving it. Number two, that there are systems in the body already designed to keep you healthy. We call it in science a state of homeostasis. So we have systems like the neuromuscular system, or we have the digestive system, or the respiratory system, or the cardiovascular system, or the immune system. All those systems are right there, ready to support you every single day. And lastly, and this is really what did it for me, and this is where my aha moment came. He said, in this office, we're not just going to focus on your symptoms. We're going to try to get to the root cause of the problem. Now, I never heard that before in my life up to that point, but it made a lot of sense. And that's what I call the world of prevention. Now, in those days, there was no wellness. There was no functional medicine. There was no integrated medicine. So when I went back to my advisor at the university, she said, why don't you become a doctor of chiropractic? That's holistic. They're accepted within all the mainstream healthcare. And then from there, I became an acupuncturist, an energy medicine expert, a nutritionist, and a wellness overall expert. And that's where I've been spending the last 35 years of my life trying to help individuals understand that pharmaceuticals and surgery have a place, and nobody disputes that. I mean, my gosh, look at these lives that have been saved because of that. But the average chronic illness can be prevented, and that's almost 75% of all of our illnesses is preventable, and that's based the lifestyle choices that we make every single day. And that's the world that I really love, and it empowers the individual to take responsibility for their health.
That is such a great insight. And when you talk about lifestyle choices, I could just tell you from personal experience about 7 years ago, being overweight, diabetic, hypertensive, prescription medications at that time, I could say that I was making choices. But here's the thing, I didn't realize that those choices were unconscious. That because I grew up feeling like I was not enough, I needed something outside of myself to feel worthy and enough. There was a part of my subconscious programming that said I needed to do more, have more, succeed. And that was the primal program. I was running my life, and I was making unconscious choices in how I was eating, sleeping, moving, and all of these things. Can we talk a little bit now about trauma how do we define trauma, and how does that actually affect our physical body and mind?
That's a very good question, because I can tell you that when I did my research for my last international best-selling book, The Power of Self-Healing, my whole objective was to interview 50 people or so that were, some of them my patients, other people's patients, that they have healed when conventional medicine told them that they would never heal. What was it that allowed that to happen? And it's very befitting right here with trauma, because what we realized is that every condition, in this case trauma, has a physical, an emotional, and a spiritual component to that condition. Now, the root cause of the trauma could be a physical trauma, meaning, let's say you fell down the ladder, that hurt your body, that maybe even broke a bone, maybe sprained your ligament and muscles. But at the same time, there is a component to that. But now, what is the emotional trauma? Let's say you were raped. What is that emotional trauma creating in the body? And then a spiritual trauma is when people feel completely disconnected with a source bigger than themselves. That's what spirituality is being connected with a source that's bigger than you. Whatever that source is for you, you're not alone. We're just one aspect of, like my dear friend Wayne Dyer taught me 30 years ago, we're not human beings living a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings living a human experience. So to answer that question, I will look at things the way I try to work with my clients and my patients is I look and see where the root cause of the problem is. So let's say that it's a physical trauma. So we know a physical trauma is going to create not only the physical problem to the particular area that you were traumatized, but it also increases hormones like cortisol or adrenaline. These are hormones that increase pain and inflammation. Now, this is where most people, unfortunately, get into the management of symptoms. Oh, I have pain. I got to numb that pain. I got to get rid of that pain. I can't stand that pain. But like I always say, pain is the alarm system of the body. You don't want to get rid of pain. You want to try to see and decipher, what is the pain trying to tell you? Is there something going on that still needs to be paid attention to? Is the source of the problem not the one that you're addressing right now? Like in many cases, I find that chemistry is great for some areas of some conditions, but actually the source of the problem may not be chemistry. It may be something else, and that's what we need to pay attention to. So the main thing to do is to start evaluating your trauma, and we can go through this by some of your analysis, is from the perspective of, is there a physical or an emotional or a spiritual component to this trauma? And then now, what is that doing to my body? And what can I do now to try to solve it, to try to move forward so my body can properly self-heal?
That is such a great insight. When you bring things together just like that, it really does show how they are all integrated as well, that a physical pain that you have actually could potentially, if that warning sign or signal is not healed, could actually bleed into some of these other parts, both your emotional as well as your spiritual as well. I wonder, Fab, can you talk a little bit more about that mind-body connection and just how they don't seem to be separated, because it seems to be not only independent entities, but they're interconnected concepts?
Well, it's interesting because today we hear of the mental health tsunami. We hear of the emotional challenges that we're having in mental health, depression, anxiety, suicide. All of these are at an all-time high right now. So let me give you a perfect example so you can see in a real example this connection that is, to me, mind-blowing. Because I have the ability, when I have new patients coming in, I have this lady that had been struggling with severe chronic pain, 7 years. This pain had not responded to any surgery, any pain medication, or anything that she had done over the last 7 years. So her son was my patient, and she said, listen, my mom is really struggling. Can I bring her to you? So I said, sure, bring her in. So when she came in as a provider, I have a question that I ask people. Once I get to know them through their history, I say, let's call her Mary for HIPAA compliance purposes. Mary, is there anything that you feel could have caused this problem that you haven't told anyone, that perhaps you thought about, but you haven't been comfortable in sharing with somebody else? And she immediately said to me, I mean, we're talking seconds, "It's my son-in-law." And I was like, what in the world? "It's my son-in-law. He's the reason for this." So what happened was 7 years ago, well, let's take it back. When she had one daughter and one son, when her daughter was 15 years old, she fell in love with this kid in high school that was older than her. She got pregnant. Because of that pregnancy, the parents had to raise the kid. You know, she had a really tough time finishing high school, but she finished high school. And because of that, the boy felt like he had to marry her. Because of the overwhelming stress of that early marriage, he became an alcoholic. And because of the alcoholism, her daughter moved out of the house with him and was really in a lot of pain for the early days. Then all of a sudden, her daughter dies. Unexpected car accident, dies immediately in the car crash. Ever since that crash, he developed the pain.
Oh, wow.
And the pain was associated with that trauma, that emotional trauma, right? But the reason that was the son-in-law is because fast forward, a few years later, her husband passes away and leaves her destitute. Now she has to live with the son-in-law because she has nowhere else to go, so she can raise the granddaughter. And because she's living with that person every day, reminding her of how much she hated him for getting her daughter pregnant and the pain he caused to her daughter, that caused her emotional pain. Now, that pain was not responding to chemistry. So what I did to her, I said, you know, Mary, before we do anything, I want you to call your son-in-law and say, "Honey, are you coming home for dinner? You know, I prepare you your favorite meal." Just make him his favorite meal, even if you have to buy it in a restaurant. When you are with him in that household, stop thinking about all the negative things. Start complimenting him, the fact that he's providing a roof over your head, the fact that he's provided for your granddaughter, the fact that he's a good man. He's not hurting people and killing people out there. Yeah, he's got problems and he's an alcoholic, but he's a good man, you know? Anyway, so she changed her mindset about him, changed her behavior about him, and within a week, the pain went away completely and never came back. Never treating her, never got to treat her, because I felt that that was the root cause of the problem. And that's a perfect example of how an emotional trauma can be a devastating physical pain.
That is such a great elucidation of that mind-body connection. And oftentimes we find we don't realize the power of our mind, because what we make things mean, the things that we focus on, the story we tell ourselves about ourselves, all creates a biochemical reaction within our body. And if we certainly live through a filter and make something mean something that our body feels as stressful, our nervous system does respond. And particularly we're in those fight or flight emotional states, we know what it does to the endocrine system in terms of raising cortisol, raising inflammation, dropping down our immune system, putting us to chronic symptoms and chronic disease. Now, there's a great step, you know, as I'm saying that, I also know recent science, there are amazing cases of people with multiple personality disorders that in certain personalities, they would have diabetes, but when they switched off to another personality, they would not have that symptom at all. So that is just an amazing additional example of just how the mind body works. I want to drive a little bit more specifically on the type of traumas that people have, so they get an idea as to what type of things could have happened before, and then start to talk about what might be first steps. Now, we know from the ACEs study, is the adverse childhood events, that if you experience these things as children, your chances of getting heart disease, diabetes, mental health issue all increases, only going to show that there are wounds very, very early on that can cause that. Now, of those, there is physical abuse. I hope you're enjoying the podcast thus far. Now, I wanted to give you a really neat resource that I've been working on for the past year. Are you living with chronic stress, burnout, or the nagging symptoms of anxiety and depression? Do you find yourself battling fatigue or brain fog or feeling like you're not performing at your best? Well, what I've been working on all of this year is made especially for you. It is an online virtual event called the Thrive State Summit. You can register now for free at thrivestatesummit.com. But what it is this: you get to connect with and learn from 50 world-renowned thought leaders, experts, and some of your favorite celebrities. We've got people like Bruce Lipton, Vishen Lakhiani, Dave Asprey, Dr. Josh Axe, all united with a shared mission to tackle the mental health crisis that is impacting each and every one of us. Now, the Thrive State Summit isn't just another event. It is really my hope that it becomes a catalyst for change, particularly in this fast-paced world. And so what can you expect? You could expect to take home life-changing takeaways from all our experts, activation sessions to be able to bring you into states of calm and relaxation, really all the resources for you to become the best version of yourself. And finally, proceeds from the Thrive State Summit will go to 4 mental health nonprofits, including Rare Impact Fund, the Trevor Project, Good Days, Genius Recoveries. So please, if you invest in yourself, and please share this resource with your friends and family members. It's something I poured my entire heart into this past year, and I know it's going to help so many people. So register now at thrivestatesummit.com.
Now, of those, there is physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, parental substance abuse, mental illness, suicide or death, or crime and imprisoned family. Those I would almost identify as big T trauma. I've also known of many experts who have discussed here, there are smaller traumas we might not be aware of, such as if you were growing up, you weren't seen, you weren't heard, you weren't able to be yourself, and always asked to put yourself down. Can you maybe explain maybe some of the more subtle type of traumas that people might not even associate to be trauma earlier on in their life?
Yeah, and to go back to what you said earlier, once you start studying the brain and understanding how it works, you realize that we already talked a little bit about how emotional trauma changes our chemistry, but it also changes and impacts our physical brain. Like, for instance, in the brain, we have what is called the amygdala. The amygdala is the stress response of the body. But you also have the hippocampus, which is the memory. A lot of the people that are struggling with memory issues right now, it's related to that trauma or that emotional stress that there hasn't been resolved. And then you have the prefrontal cortex, which is your decision making. A lot of people that say, I just can't seem to make a decision. So these are all underlying changes that are going on in the body that are causing you. But to answer your question, I can tell you that we know right now, especially through science that have developed over the last 20 years, that our environment as we were growing up pretty much is dictating our environment today, because how you saw and responded to your circumstances and your environment at that stage, whether it was you or you saw your parents. Like, I was talking in a lecture with my dear friend, Bruce Lipton, and Bruce is a biologist, as you know, I've become very famous. And Bruce was telling the audience, only about 10 or 50% of all your conditions are genetically driven. The rest is all pretty much environment and behaviors and mindset. And I said to him afterwards, I said, my gosh, Bruce, so many people think that just because my mom and my dad have this pre-existing condition or this genetic condition, I'm going to have it too, and my kids are going to have it too. It doesn't work like that. It's how you saw your parents respond to that condition growing up. If you keep the same mindset and behaviors, you're going to probably end up having that condition. If your mom had breast cancer and you saw your mom every day think, oh my God, I have breast cancer because my mom had breast cancer, right? And then all of a sudden, she made choices that were poor in her diet, in her behaviors, mindset behaviors. All of a sudden, that made a difference. So it's very important to recognize that your genes is not a life sentence. Your genes are there as a predisposition of what you need to be aware of. And then what you do is you begin to do the opposite of what those entities did that you were raised with in order to come up with a different outcome. So some of the things that people that are minor is also the not feeling loved.
Yes.
It wasn't just not being seen. It's the fact that right now the majority of the people are seeking some kind of validation and love connection. That's one of the biggest drivers that we see today why people are emotionally traumatized. They were raised in an environment that mom and dad never showed me a case of love, right? I went to school. I went to chiropractic school with a dear friend of mine that was an athlete. And he said, the first time I met him, I went to give him a hug because I'm a big hugger, as you know. And he said he almost beat me up. Later, we became good friends and he shared with me the true story. He said, you know, Pap, when you try to embrace me, I didn't know what to think. Never in my life I have been hugged by a man before. My father never hugged me. My grandfather never hugged me. My friends, my brother never hugged me. We don't hug. And then I said, and he said, after you did it, I realized how good a hug felt. It was that connection that he was lacking. And because of that hug, I went home. And after Christmas dinner, he went home for the Christmas break. I went back to the porch and told my dad that I loved him and that I would like to give him a hug. And they embraced. And now he's probably one of the biggest huggers you'll ever see because he realized that a hug was something that may seem insignificant for some people, but it may be the first time or the only time that week or that day or that month that you would actually feel the connection with another human being, you know, especially when it's pure, especially when it's unconditional, especially when it's with an intention that is very powerful. So I believe that the most important thing that we need to understand in this process is the fact that trauma happens in big ways, but also in small ways. And little things right now, like the stress levels of people are so high because those are all minor traumas that are going on every day. Most people, when they have a big issue, it's usually something big that happened in their life. They lost their job. They lost a loved one. They broke up with their loved one, you know, something like that. But in reality, it's the little stressors every day, those unseen little things that happen every day that accumulate over time. And they're the ones that begin to actually impact the chemistry of your body, but also the way that your body functions, you know? So I think it's very important to recognize that if you've had physical or emotional trauma, I'll never forget this story. When I was in school, we had a patient in our clinic, and that patient came in with severe whiplash. But then in the history, showed that she had no accident. But she came in, you know, so then the doctor started asking questions. And I was there as an intern just observing. And the doctor said to her, have you ever had any other accidents before? And she said, oh, yes, that happened 2 years ago. I was driving home late at night. And all of a sudden, I'm driving home and it's raining, terrible. I looked at my rear mirror. I see these headlights coming my way, and boom, a car hits me real hard. And all of a sudden, I ended up in emergency. Well, what happened this time was that the lady was driving home, different city, different job. This happened years later. And it was raining at night. She saw the headlights coming her way, but the car never hit her. And her symptoms were the same as it was when it hit her the first time around years before. So what happens is, and this is where I had to really learn, all trauma stores in the body, in our cells, as memory cells. Those memory cells are stored within our bodies, meaning our organs, our muscles, our ligaments. Why is it that an athlete continues to sprain the same right ankle all the time instead of the left one? Because once you sprain an ankle, that sprain stays within the memory cells of that ligament and those muscles around it. And then, therefore, next time that person is set up in a position where it's a similar situation, the body automatically reacts to the memory and gives you the sprained ankle just because it remembered what it was like to have a sprained ankle. So you have to be able to be aware of all of these things. So we have techniques that we can actually help the person unblock those memories and create new memories. And the beautiful thing about the brain, especially this new science called neuroplasticity, most people hear that word, but they don't know what it means. It just means that there used to be a time and scientists thought that our brains were not changing, and our brains are constantly adapted to your environment around you. So the good news is that you can condition your brain to eliminate a negative environment, a negative memory, a negative past, and create a new set of pathways and new neurons that are going to be creating a positive for yourself. So we know, for instance, I give you some perfect examples, that affirmations do that. So the science of affirmation is not only saying every single day, I am healthy when you're not. I am healthy. My body's healing. I'm healthier today than I was yesterday. All of those things are great to say, and they do make a difference. But then the secret now is now you're going to stay about 5 or 15 minutes in silence with your eyes closed, and then get into the feeling of what it would be like if you had already surpassed the challenges that you were having. If you were going through an illness, see that illness already healed. How would you feel if you don't have that pain and agony every day, or that infection has gone away, or that autoimmune disease is no longer in your body, or all of a sudden that asthma or respiratory chronic illness is no longer there? How would you feel? And stay in that feeling for 5 or 15 minutes. And now they put an electron microscope in your brain that shows us that that old pattern has gone away, and a new pathway and a new set of neurons and a new tree is being built in your brain with a new memory that is actually going to allow your body to get to the healing state that you want to heal. That's the science of today that is revolutionizing the way that we currently heal. And that's why I wanted to bring the power of self-healing to the world, to empower people to not feel that they are prisoners of their conditions.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential, to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for thrivestatestarter.com, because in there, you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally, a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You can find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at thrivestatestarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves, and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed. And please enjoy the remainder of this podcast.
That their conditions are only there to help them understand that the body's struggling, but that they need to seek out other answers that are not just conventional, but go out there. Like I have a buddy of mine told me a month ago, he got pancreatic cancer. Now, this guy is one of the most mindset, incredible people. So what he did, he's gone out there and interviewed anybody that has succeeded beating pancreatic cancer. And he has been on a mission for the last couple of months, traveling all over the world, found a clinic out of Austria that was doing some kind of feedback mechanism that is giving him the best potential of healing, found other scientists in different places, all from the interviews that he did. You see, he is not letting his pancreatic cancer said, put your affairs in order and you may have a couple of weeks left or a couple of months left. He decided that he was not going to be a victim to his condition. And that's where we need to find the new healthcare system of today. We need to empower people to realize that disease is not the problem. Disease is only to help us evaluate the mindset and the behaviors that are causing us to be sick today. And once you do that and you alter those, now all of a sudden you can have the potential of self-healing that you're looking for.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to drop a mic right now, but I've got a headset on. And you mentioned Bruce Lipton. I somehow thought his name was going to come up today because he actually invited me. I'm in San Diego right now. He invited me to keynote with himself and Greg Braden here in San Diego. And what a beautiful soul, what a beautiful man he is. As you're bringing all this, I could say right now, how should the general person think about trauma? For myself, I feel like I'm in pretty good condition, but I almost feel that there are definitely times of stressors and things of that nature. There might still be some unresolved trauma that I have in my own body. Would you say that the majority of people have potentially some unresolved traumas that they might not think that that's actually happening? They occasionally have an ache or pain, or they find themselves getting stressed out all the time? Or would you say that the majority of people are trauma-free, but there are people that experience, and there are definitely people that have bigger traumas that are happening in their life? What would you say the range of people should be thinking about? Is there trauma still left in my body?
It's interesting you say that, because recently, over the last couple of years, I've been working with a lady that is a psychotherapist, but one of the top healers that I found. And her methodology of healing, especially when the individuals come in with stress or any type of issue that they're undergoing right now, is she takes you back to when you were a child. And she takes you back and say, was this condition, was this trauma around in any way during your early childhood? And what happened? What did you do? What did you see others do? How did they respond to it? What was the discussion? What was the stress level at that time? She finds that over 80% of her conditions that come her way are rooted in an early unresolved issue, an early adaptability issue of what they saw when they were younger, that they had no even a conscious understanding of that. So her method of resolving it is very simple. Now we're going to go back and we're going to then begin to act differently. What would you do? What would you tell your younger self? With what you know today, how would you respond differently knowing that that was happening? I'll give you a perfect example. So if all of a sudden you grew up in an environment that was maybe alcohol or drugs, right? Which is a very typical, a lot of people don't talk about. Sometimes the alcohol and drugs may lead to abuse, which is still a very silent trauma that a lot of people are not discussing, but is very rampant. That's what I've learned in my 35 years of experience. So how you saw that as an adult now, you can go back to that early child. And what would you tell that early child when you saw mom and dad, that were maybe alcoholics, or the way they responded because of the alcohol, the way that they were treating each other? Right? So now all of a sudden you're an adult and your husband is drinking. Now you go back to that child and you relive all of those years of pain, even though your husband just started drinking, and you're thinking that's going to be my life, and you blow it out of proportion. All of a sudden you make that drink become so bad because of all those early memories of pain and anger. So what she says is, most of us are responding to our trauma today based on the experiences of that trauma in the past. Not only how we responded, but how others responded around them, because all of that is in our subconscious. So I think it's important to understand that regardless of where you are today, I think it's important to evaluate, how is this trauma showing up in my life? Is there something that I could have done to cause this trauma? That's the first question I ask myself anytime I deal with a trauma. Is there something in myself that I could have caused this to happen? Whatever that may be. Could have been an injury, could have been emotional trauma, could have been even a spiritual trauma. There's something that could be causing. If the answer is no, then what could be causing this? You know, and you start doing deductive reasoning. You start all of a sudden unpeeling the onion and trying to find out. And then I ask myself the question, what is the trauma here trying to teach me? If the trauma is your best friend, if the trauma is a blessing in disguise, what is it here trying to teach you? Is it trying to teach me that I need to maybe pay attention to my behavior a little bit more, that my behavior is getting a little reckless? I can tell you, as you know, I mentor a lot of CEOs. These are some of the most influential, wealthy people that I know. And the problem with wealth is that wealth makes you already more of what you already are. So a lot of the times I find that my wealthy people, the more money they make, they start doing reckless behaviors to try to push that envelope to see whether they can stand it. But the unfortunate thing, the reckless behavior may be playing with drugs, not knowing that they had an addictive personality, playing with extramarital affairs, not knowing that that was going to cause them to have a divorce or a breakup, you know, or even pushing the legal, right, boundaries that they feel, well, I'm in a position right now, I can get away with this. Nobody's going to find out. Trust me, they will find out. So don't do it, you know? So they start pushing the ethical and legal, so they get in trouble. And all of a sudden, like I had one of my clients, unfortunately made a bad decision. It cost him $700 million in punishment and lost his company because of a simple bad decision that he thought he could get away with it. And the court said, no, we're going to make an example out of you and we're not going to let you get away with it. So find out, what is the trauma trying to teach me? And then this is the key. The last one that I ask myself is, what can I do today? What can I do today to resolve and make sure that this trauma never comes back? And that empowers you to realize that you can't do anything about the past, and you definitely can't do anything about the future, but you can handle this moment right now. This 24 hours, what am I going to do right now that will help me ensure that I can resolve that trauma and ensure that it never happens again? And that empowers you now to realize, you know what? This trauma actually was a blessing in disguise. And because of that, now I'm able to be a better person, a stronger person, and be able to maybe go into the world a little bit more aware of my own mindset and behaviors and make better choices.
I think that's so empowering to know. I think people who are new, who are just recognizing that trauma can be a potential component, might go, I wonder for me what might be the first steps. And my question to you is, you shared a beautiful technique right now earlier in terms of using your mindset to be able to feel the healing. That's certainly a way of doing, using visualization. We know some people use breath work to be able to heal the trauma, quiet down the subconscious so that you can start releasing things from there. You mentioned a psychotherapist that probably does some child regression and analyses for you. What is the menu of things that are out there in terms of addressing trauma, and how, for somebody who's new that might just be going, maybe I have some trauma in my life, how should they think about their approach to the first steps in this process?
Well, you know, it's interesting. So let's say that you take a blank sheet of paper and you list the trauma and you put a line in between. On the left side, you're going to drive and write down all the negative things that trauma is causing in your life right now. On the right side, you're going to start writing what are the positive things that the trauma may be bringing into your life. What are the opportunities? What are the positives? Most people focus on the negative, so they get more negative, because the law of attraction says whatever we focus on, we tend to multiply. We tend to attract more in our lives. So if you focus on the pain, right, you're going to get more pain in your life because you're going to be focused on that. But if you focus on not having pain, then you have less pain and you can manage that. So that is one great exercise. So what I do is I say, start focusing on the right side, start focusing on the positive and begin there. The second one that I find very powerful is meditation. There are so many studies of meditation out there, But a lot of people are not trained in meditation, right? We were raised, with parents or grandparents that meditated in most cases. Some of us were, some of us weren't. So when I tell people, I say, there's a lot of wonderful guided meditations that you can find on YouTube or podcasts, etc., that you can begin there. Let somebody else's experience in meditation become your guiding role until you can get more trained, more focused, and then you can then be a silent meditator, which is one of the most powerful ones too. So a guided meditation, you and I love BreakTap, which is like meditation times 100, which is a headset that has LED lights, frequencies, and sound that has over 2,500, guided meditations and guided sessions that allow you to redo the subconscious mind in order to give you a positive outcome of whatever it is. If you have anxiety, then it has anxiety, things that will help you lower that anxiety. A lack of abundance in your life, you're always feeling like you never have enough. It does that. So that's another one that I like. The breath that you mentioned is one of my favorites because the average American is breathing 25 to 30% of his capabilities. So just having deep breaths by themselves, deep breathing in and out, in through your nose, out through your mouth, as much as you can throughout the day, that in itself is already going to bring oxygen into the bloodstream. It's going to get your brain more alert. It's going to let your system function a little bit better. It's going to boost your immune system and other things like that. And then another one that a lot of people don't talk about, but because of my faith, I say prayer. I have found in my book, I actually included prayer, regardless of your denomination, right? Prayer is extremely powerful because you're putting your intention in a prayer on something bigger than yourself, and that gives you a sense of hope. And hope is very healing. Most people don't heal because they lost hope. Bernie Siegel, a very famous oncologist in the 80s and 90s, told me that the reason that most cancer patients died was not because of the cancer, was because they bought into the diagnosis and the prognosis that they only had a few weeks to live. And immediately they shut down their bodies, they shut down their minds, they put their affairs in orders, and they died usually sooner than what they predicted. He said, the patients that came to me and said, Dr. Siegel, I cannot die. I got to walk my daughter down the hall 5 years from now. I have a business that I want to start that I want to see through, or I have to be able to support my parents that are aging. I got to be here for them. Whatever that motivation was, he said that those patients were the ones that put the cancer in remission because it has something bigger than themselves. So prayer does that. It gives you hope. It makes you understand that the condition is not a life sentence, that you are there. The trauma is not meant to victimize you. The trauma is there to empower you to become this person that you don't even think you are, right? The universe doesn't give you what you can't handle. You will handle this, but you have to look at it from a positive way. You have to look at it from a constructive way, not as a punishment, but as a message of hope, a message of saying, there is more to you. And this is going to help you get there. I had a patient that came to my office, and she was a runner, a very successful woman, 35 years old in her company. She was one of the top 3. She was a runner. One morning she went for a run. She came back to the house, and as she was taking a shower, a man walked in, broke into the house, raped her, and left. She was devastated. She came into my office after that. She said, I don't know where to go. And I said, I can't even imagine how you're feeling right now. All I can tell you is in my life, I know that the biggest challenges, the biggest traumas that I went through have been my greatest blessings. They have shaped me to be the person I am, So why don't we talk a little bit? So I got her to go to the hospital. She got checked. Then I recommended that she go into a group session, right? She wasn't ready to do the individual. I said, why don't you go into the group here? What other rape victims are saying and see. Well, in that group session, she realized that she wanted to turn this into a positive, like I mentioned to her, and she began to lead those group sessions. Then she began to lecture all over the United States on how to deal with that. And she allowed herself to not become victimized, but actually inspire thousands of people that she was inspiring through her lectures at that time in how to handle this issue, how to not let the rape victimize you. But it gets better than that. 5 years later, I haven't seen her in 3 years. I'm in a restaurant. She walks in with this beautiful guy, and she says, "So I want you to meet Anthony. He just proposed to me." And she said, "You know, Dr. Fab, what I never told you is in 35 years, right, before the rape, she never attracted a healthy relationship. Most men saw the beauty that she was, never treated her with respect. They were intimidated by her business success." She says, "It wasn't until after this break that I realized that it's not my physical body that counts, it's my emotions, it's my strength that she had to find, right, to deal with the rape, that allowed her to attract a man that saw her for who she really was and not her physical beauty." You see, that to me is what trauma is about. Trauma is a friend in disguise. Trauma is there to help us. And even as a doctor, I don't see a trauma as a negative. I address it, right, whether it's physically or emotionally or even spiritually. But at the same time, I try to empower the person in front of me to think beyond what is going on right now, to try to figure it out. How can we leverage this to become something so positive in your life that you're going to be grateful that you had this trauma, right? Anthony Robbins said that he was raised with a lot of trauma and he blamed his parents for his misery. And even though he had all this success, he sabotaged it all until he began to realize that if his parents were not the way they were and they were not giving him that trauma early as a boy, he would have never become the Anthony Robbins that he became. And it wasn't until he saw that behavior as a blessing in his life and he began to treat his parents and think of them in a positive way instead of the other, that his success went to another level. So realize that unless you resolve some of these things, you will sabotage your own success. And many people do that. You know, they become very successful, and what do? They sabotage their success because of those unresolved traumas that they never address, that maybe they were too painful. Maybe they're so back there in the subconscious that you don't even remember them. But there's so many techniques today that we can use to be able to help us tap into that and be able to resolve them. And not only that, allow them to become a great reminder of the person that we were meant to be, not the person that we were when it happened.
I hope you enjoyed that excerpt from the Thrive State Summit on this week's episode of the Thrive State Podcast. If you want to listen to the full interview along with the full interviews of the 50 thought leaders, experts, and celebrities in the mental health, emotional wellness world, please register for free at ThriveStateSummit.com. Again, if you find this podcast useful, please subscribe. Please share this episode with your friends and family members, and do us a favor by leaving us 5-star wherever podcasts are heard. It will help the show grow. And finally, if you haven't already, get the free resources. I have a bundle of longevity as well as peak performance resources to give you, which includes ebooks, lecture notes, breathwork exercises. You can get them all at ThriveStateStarter.com. Thank you again. Thanks for being a part of our community and our mission to really elevate human potential. And remember always, you are your best medicine.